Good evening. I'm going to open my Bible to where I'm going to read from. But as I give my testimony, I just want to say in the beginning that I'm not here to testify to bring a reproach against anyone that's dead or alive or to get sympathy from anyone. This is my testimony. It's the first time I've ever given my whole testimony, and I hope I can get it all out. My first memories were of a mom and dad that were Christian people, and by the time I was 4 years old, I remember being raised in the church, and by the time I was 6, there were some things going wrong in our home, and I didn't know what they were, but now that I'm older, I know that my mom she had 5 children, and she had gotten pregnant again, and she had to have surgery, and she got hooked on pain pills. Well, after she couldn't get pain pills anymore, she turned to alcohol. And there were 5 little kids, and she lost the babies that she had surgery for. And my dad was a Christian man, and he tried to keep us as well as he could all together, but that didn't happen. By the time I was 9 and 10 years old, we had been sent to different relatives to stay with, and my youngest sister and I were sent to live with my grandmother, my step-grandfather, and my step-grandfather abused my youngest sister and I. So by the time I was 11 and 12, we went back to North Carolina to live with my dad, and my sister right ahead of me, she was 15 and I was 12, and we were sent to a reform school because we didn't have anyone to take care of us, and back then you didn't have the system to rely on to help. But we went to the reform school, and back then also I thought that was the worst thing that ever happened to me, but really it was one of the best things that ever happened to me. And while we were in reform school, my dad died, and I was 14, and that just broke our heart. He was our rock. And so by the time I was 15, my sister and I, we got out of the reform school, and let me back up a little bit. By the time I was 12, I'd already started drinking and going to a club with my sister. And so at that time also I wasn't going to school, and we ended up in reform school. So by the time I was 15, my dad had died, and we got out of reform school and were sent to live with my grandmother and my step-grandfather again. And I was always afraid of the abuse, so I got married about 6 months after I got out of reform school, and I got pregnant, had my first child when I was 16, had my second child when I was 17, and my husband was abusive. He was abusive in every way. And so as time went along, after I'd been married, I was 19, and my mom, she was never in the picture, in and out of the picture, but she had stopped drinking, and I had seen her in July. And the end of July, I got a message at age 19 that she had been murdered by my stepfather. He was an alcoholic. So we went to her funeral, and then the abuse at home got worse, and I would be riding in the car with him. If he was drunk, he would stick guns to my head and, just hit me as we were going down the road. And one particular day he did that, and I thought he was going to kill me, and I prayed. Back then I was going to church, and with my in-laws. My husband didn't go to church, but I was going to church with my in-laws, and I was praying that he wouldn't kill me in front of my children. But when I got home, my youngest sister was living with me, and she saw the blood all over my face because he'd been hitting me, and she left. So after that, I decided, well, maybe if I have another baby, maybe it will help things out. So by the time I was 22, I had my 3rd child. Well, things didn't get any better. They got worse, and of course I didn't have parents or anyone to rely on. So I put up with it. I did try to leave him at one time, but it didn't work. I had to come back because I didn't have an education, didn't have a high school education, couldn't depend on myself. So at 24, things were pretty bad, and I remember that he had started involving the children in the abuse, not as, anything as bad as to me, But I would pray, and God told me one day, you're not going to have to put up with this too much longer. And it was probably about 2 weeks later, he got killed in a car wreck. He was 7 years older than me. He was 29. And so even though he was abusive, he was still all I had, and I mourned him. And my sister came to live with me, and there was a lot of young people in and out of my home at that time. Although I'd lived a Christian life before that, I was introduced to drugs right after that by a good friend. Well, I thought it was a good friend. And so there started my life of alcohol, drugs, partying, men, the whole 9 yards, everything goes with it. I tried to get out of that life, and once you get into it and you don't really know what direction to go in, and back then also rehab wasn't a real big option. You had to have insurance or money or whatever. But it got to the point to where I got really bad, and the doctor ordered me into rehab, which was Fenwick-Hall at that time. And it did me some good, and but I decided that I needed to get married again. I needed to get married, and I needed to have a regular life with I married the same kind of man. He was an alcoholic, he was an abuser, he had a nice family, but I just couldn't find my way. And so I stayed with him, counting living with him, and after I got married 17 years, we had 2 more children. I thought, in my mind, I really thought that children would help. But it got to the point to where I was kind of living by myself, living with him, because he was always gone on the weekends. So after 17 years, I divorced him. I got my high school education, I started going back to school, and my 2 sisters and I had a wallpaper business. So we were working, and when the base closed, we didn't hardly have any work. So JCPenney came to town they were going to build a store. And so we went to work for them, and we ended up going on the road working for them. And they had positions for women, not many, most of them were men, that you could work your way up into this company, and that's what I wanted to do. My husband and I had joint custody of our children, so he kept them during the week because I gave him the house because they wanted to go to Berkeley School and I wanted to move out of town. So he had them during the week and I had them on the weekends, and my 2 sisters and I traveled a little bit in the Southeast and did JCPenney stores. Well, when you're working on the road with a lot of men, I went out to bars and I drank, and I asked God to, even during that time, to help me. I need to know what to do because I missed my children, I missed home life, but I didn't know how to get myself straight. So it came the time my daughter got married and she got involved in a church. And one weekend I was at home and she said, "Mom," she said, "I'm concerned for your soul." And I said, "Well, I pray. Who are you really?" In my mind, I was saying, "Who are you to tell me what to do, And she said, "Mom, God does not hear a sinner's prayer unless the first prayer is the prayer of repentance." And that hit me like a brick. 2 weeks later, I came home, I went to a revival at her church, and I gave my life to the Lord. That was February 17, 1997. And I have tried to live my life for the Lord, and it's the best life I've ever lived. I'm not saying it's been perfect, and I have fallen. I have had times that, but not going back to the alcohol and drugs and whatever, but, just everyday life I have fallen. I never got married again because I just decided that that wasn't for me. But one night I was driving home from work, and I work right downtown. I'm a hospice nurse, and I was driving home, and I prayed, and I was saved 2 years, and I prayed, and I said, "God, if you will, please send me a companion." And in my mind, he gave me scripture, Isaiah 54. And in that scripture, it says, "I will be your husband." And I accepted that. I accepted he's going to be my husband. But he did send me a companion. I didn't know he was going to be 2 years old. It's my grandson. I said, God knows what I needed. But you have to be very specific in your prayers. But now that young man, he's out here, and he's 17. He's already been preaching for the Lord. He has involved in several ministries, and I thank God for him. But God has been good to me, and I want you to know that if you're in any kind of situation that you can't find your way out, look to him. He said, if you will lift me up, I will draw all men unto me. And then about 10 years after God gave me Isaiah 54, it's a real good chapter if y'all want to read it. I had some hospice patients at a nursing home with Sister Kathy Gary, and we met, we started talking, and on a Monday she came up to me, I'd been there the week before, and she said, I just want to tell you that God gave me the scripture to give to you last week and I didn't give it to you. And she said, so I need to give you the scripture, and it was Isaiah 54. And it just touched my heart that God had given her the same scripture he gave me, and I knew it was for me, you know. But I thank God, and I thank God for this church for giving me this opportunity to tell my testimony. Today I have 5 children, 9 grandchildren. I'm working still as a hospice nurse. Hopefully I can retire next year. But I thank God for my life and thank him for what he's done for me. And the things that have happened to me in my life, I want God to use those things as stepping stones for me, to be able to help people that are going through anything I've ever been through, you know, to be able to even counsel if anyone needs some advice, and I can help, I will be willing to do that. And y'all pray for me. I thank you.